the developer is more often going to be handing a skeleton out to the browser, and the browser, through the open social JavaScript libraries, will be calling back into a network, will be fetching information about the user, the social graph, etc. And Yahoo is there delivering the page, but isn't actually a pass-through for the server. Additionally, there's browser-side Flash, and this is a way for developers to create oftentimes these rich media applications. And we'll talk about what the Flash capabilities are. You'll find out they're actually very similar to OpenSocial, but there's a hybridized version where the Flash toolkit can also call back into Yahoo directly and leverage server-side pieces that we provide. And then finally, hybrid. These components can actually be mixed together. You could, if you wanted to, have a server-side pass-through that passed a Flash object that actually leveraged OpenSocial components as well, and that's just fine. We don't actually constrain any of those programming models or draw a box around them, and developers are free to essentially pick and choose. A few of the technologies that we'll talk about just briefly. YML, a markup language that Yahoo has developed, that allows developers to take encapsulated and rich functionality, essentially put a tag into their control structures to say, do this here, and Yahoo will take care of the heavy lifting for them. These are used very common, for things like invite streams, where you want the user to invite participation, to invite someone to join your network, to share an application, etc. Rather than teach every developer how to fetch a buddy list, how to put that into an XForm, how to turn that XForm into a submit, and then do the data validation on top of it, we go ahead and make things like that available for you immediately. We'll talk a little bit about Kaha as well. Capabilities JavaScript, the ability for a developer to make some JavaScript of their own that gets delivered to the browser after being filtered or cajoled. It's very important, of course, for safety for the user, such that we don't allow unfettered, unfiltered, and sort of wild JavaScript. And then, as Cody's mentioned a couple times already, the fact that we're leveraging OAuth, which will allow not only the developer to recognize Yahoo and vice versa, but will allow that developer in the application model to turn around and use those tokens to access additional services on the Yahoo network on behalf of the user.
So what we'll talk about here, we'll deep dive into that programming model that Neil talked about and actually walk through some of the architecture. But first, just to frame how the platform itself kind of comes together for the user experience, there's a couple of major components on the end user side. One is what we call the application base, and this is the equivalent of a full view, if you will, in the open social parlance. It's a way for you to have actually your own canvas on Yahoo. Essentially becomes your destination for your application. It's dynamic. Users can use this to actually be able to interact, share information, pull information from their friends. Allows cajoled through Kaha JavaScript, allows Flash, and really becomes the home on the web for your application. And then beyond that, we have the notion of a small box, which is the widget view or small view of your application. This can get installed across Yahoo into various properties. And we think this is where Yahoo, again, the context of the consumer experiences on Yahoo becomes really important. We have My Yahoo as an environment where the small box can get installed. The Yahoo profile, the place where users have their identity on Yahoo, is a place where the small box can get exposed. And we'll be rolling out more and more small box implementations over the next year. And the important thing about the small box is it is a cached view. So it is HTML or YML only, and essentially on the server side you can set this view to be, to push information from your user as your user does something in the full view or elsewhere.
So these are the two basic targets. These are what a developer will use to get to 90% of the world. That they can actually use these, if they've implemented this small box in the application base, it's a generally portable application. There's specialized targets that they can develop as well. So we have examples here. One of the first specialized targets that we built was known as SearchMonkey. It was an additional way for developers to build into the search page, which is a very constrained experience from a visual perspective, and it also has very high performance requirements. But you can build an application that has, for example, a SearchMonkey view, a small box view, and an application-based view, and they operate very differently, the same application, depending on where the user happens to be on the network. Additionally, Openmail is another one of those views that may appear, let's say, visually similar to something like the application base. It's there in a large canvas. It has a left nav on it. and it's just sitting there in mail. But it is a different view because it has a very different level of restriction around privacy. That it's a much higher bar for a user to install an application that can read through their email box, read through their inbox, than it is to say put a canvas, a game on a canvas that really doesn't have any interaction or any access to private information.
And I think what's going to be interesting about the application platform and where Yahoo will provide some uniqueness to the overall application space is, again, the notion of these contexts. So you have your application base, which is kind of your control panel for the user, if you will, where they go to interact. But then, consider that users are spending a lot of their time in properties, right? So they come to my Yahoo every day, or they come to the Yahoo front page, or they come to Yahoo Mail. And that one application of yours that they've installed, you can actually build contexts that are different for each of those box views, right? So let's take a real simple example of Netflix, right? So on my profile, I might want to show my friends the movies in my queue. On my Yahoo page, I might want to consume the content that my friends want to share with me. So I think that becomes powerful. And getting to the notion of sharing and discovery, really three primary mechanisms for this. I think this is pretty industry standard at this point. But essentially a gallery, so users can browse and find content that they want to install to a given endpoint, a given property, right? Which will result in the app being installed universally to Yahoo. And then a notion of the updates platform being able to share events to a user as your friends or your connections or other people are using an application. That application can broadcast updates back, and you might see them or consume them and decide to go install that application. And then finally, an invitation mechanism. In the Yahoo application platform specifically, a lot of the invitation functions will be encapsulated through YML, but the ability to be able to as you're using something, be able to challenge a friend to come join you, or be able to share something with a friend and invite them to come join you in an application.
So I'm going to talk briefly about a few of the user expectations and things that drove decisions around our application platform. First of all, security. There are four things that we really leveraged to provide security for the user. The first one is around the application base. It's served in an iframe, and it's served out of domain. It's not served on yahoo.com. That will, of course, protect against some of the basic attacks, such as the the developer JavaScript having direct access to cookies that would be enclosed in the larger scope. The filtering happens on the small box. That there is actually, because it's a relatively stable view, and one that's pushed from the developer, it allows Yahoo to go ahead and filter it up front before delivery. It's not direct to browser. It's not delivered directly from the developer, and therefore that filtering allows us to do some security and sanity checks as well. YML, as we mentioned before, is the ability to encapsulate certain activities, not only to provide a convenience function, but in this case to restrict developer access to otherwise sensitive information that could be of derivative value or that the user might want in the course of using that application. And then finally, as we mentioned before, of course, Kaha, the capabilities JavaScript, allowing JavaScript through, but only after it's been deemed safe and essentially sandboxed. For those that are unfamiliar, Kaha allows you to not only filter the JavaScript, but then alter it such that it only receives DOM access through a well-defined client-side API. From a performance perspective, as noted before, we think that the small view, the small box, if you will, is one of the most important factors. That we provide something that's immediately accessible, that's cached, and that's pushed by the developer.